everyone.
Hi.
This is Chen from Pavlov Financial Planning. I'm a certified financial planner and a Globetrotter, and I'm currently in Arlington, Virginia for another 5 weeks.
And I'm Jodi Harris, a life coach with World Tree Coaching and also a Globetrotter. And I'm currently in Yokohama for another 4 weeks before moving to Tokyo, which is not that far, but another move.
Yeah, and we're actually packing our houses the same day, so it was quite exciting. Yeah, so today this is the Ep.3, and we are going to talk about flexibility and the idea of being flexible, living a globetrotting life. And this is a very contentious topic sometimes. When I first became a training spouse, this is what I hear all the time, is that, for people who successfully navigated this lifestyle, the number one reason they cited, or number one, the best thing you could do in this life is be flexible, which I understand, and I continue to understand, living this life for a while. But I hate people telling me to be flexible. What do you think?
I don't mind people telling me to be flexible. I don't find that people often tell me to be flexible. I guess I think I am pretty flexible, at least when it comes to our life. Or I think that in general, I'm pretty good at choosing where flexibility is important and where having more structure is important. Yeah, so I guess I don't really mind it because I see how important it is. And I think it's a good reminder.
So how do you pick what to be flexible
That's such a good question. I think in general, you have to approach day-to-day life and situations with a high degree of flexibility. So, and that takes putting yourself in the mindset that, okay, the things that have happened, and the things that are ahead of me, I can prepare for to the best of my ability, but I have no way to predict what's actually going to happen. But within that framework of knowing what you can and cannot predict and what you can and cannot change, there's an importance, I think, in having a certain set of traditions and rituals. I think especially when you have kids. In our case, we have 3 kids. So we really stick to things like our bedtime rituals, and that we eat dinner together, as much as we can. Occasionally that doesn't happen if I have to work late or my husband has to work late, but, always, at least 5 nights a week, we eat dinner together. And, the kids have their same bedtime rituals, and that those things we hold on to pretty tightly because I guess in a way it helps us approach other things with flexibility. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like if something goes wrong.
Yeah, that's
Go ahead. You kind of broke up there.
No, I was going to say that was a really good point. It's related back to what we talked about last episode about habits. And you were talking about having a routine and a structure that allow you actually to be flexible. So if you have this core of, this is me, this is my routine, this is my habit, and this is my identity, I won't change it, and allows like a broader sphere of other things. If it surprises you way, it's easier for you to take control.
Yeah, we have that happen when our, and this is something I think really plays into just, for me, but for anyone who lives this lifestyle and faces a crisis. So like a couple years ago, our middle son got really sick when we were posted in Madagascar. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and he was very, very sick. Like he and I had, 24 hours to leave the country because there was no healthcare there there was just no healthcare there. And so within that, perspective of, okay, what are we going to do? Is my husband going to stay in Madagascar? Is he going to curtail his position or try to get another position in DC? Or, what are we going to do? Because we had these kind of strong things that we hold to, that, okay, we're a team and we work together and we support our kids in these particular rituals or whatever. It enabled us to be flexible about the larger question of what we were going to do with our life, since we had to leave our since we had this disruption to our posting,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was talking about earlier, like I hate people telling me to be flexible, I think there's also part of it. It's just maybe just pure emotional. Like I agree. I'm probably also a pretty flexible
Right.
person, but the emotion coming from people telling me to be flexible, meaning maybe I'm not flexible. So I wonder if there's any like examples that you wouldn't mind sharing that, was there any time, even just not people telling you to be flexible, but you decide to be flexible, but it actually makes you feel like, ugh, I don't want to be flexible with this, but I had to.
Right. It's funny because the thing that comes to mind is we once had, a lot of expats face this, that you go back in the summer and, to your home country, to your passport country. And, you're trying to see family all over different places. And and again, I always, like in our case, we have kids and they're tired and it's a lot of moving around. And we once had a family member tell us, I can't remember the exact disagreement, but it was something about the time that we were spending in the different places. They said, "Oh, you're being so inflexible." And we were just like, what? And that's a case where I'm like, I can't be more flexible, right? I mean, I still have to like live my life within the constraints of, I get, these 30 days or whatever. And I do think that, I don't know if that kind of gets to what you're saying, is that it's anytime someone's telling you to be a certain way, when you're aware of it, or you're like doing your best to be adaptable or flexible or open-minded or anything, I think particularly for expats, that's jarring because our experience is often so outside of what other people experience and so unimaginable that we have a tendency to be like, our lens is so unique that if we're getting particularly advice from, people outside of our community, it's like, wow, you can't even really know, what this experience is like for me. Maybe some example. Yeah. But what about, go ahead.
So I was going to actually lead into this question because I thought about this, sometimes because of this lifestyle, we don't really only have to prepare ourselves for flexibility. You have to prepare other people to be able to accommodate us. So actually, I would like to discuss those two things sort of in tandem, because that's sort of also where the question came from. Like we talked about having a core that, that doesn't change, and the other things that allow us to be more flexible with other things. However, so was there any ever situation where you just, the situation is such that requires you, it goes into that core that it requires you to change that core, really sort of, give you like negative emotion and things, not just like sort of inconvenience, but actually sort of tap into how you feel about yourself. I don't know. And related to that, like how, if that's the case, then, and if you choose not to be flexible in that case, that may affect other people or affect in general how everything works. So how do we prepare other people to be flexible?
Right. Well, that's such a great question. I think, the first thing that comes to mind, and I'll give this example and then maybe I'll be like, oh, it's not a good example. But the first thing that comes to mind is just, when we started this international lifestyle, I really strongly identified myself as a clinical social worker and psychotherapist. And that identity, really professional identity, was really important to me. But when we got on when we began our first overseas assignment 7 years ago, and I had actually worked abroad, I did part of my master's thesis abroad. So, it's like I thought, I can do my work anywhere. But when we had our first overseas assignment and I was kind of forced to examine what my professional identity meant, that forced me to be much more flexible of how I see myself. And that's still happening. It's still kind of this process of, now I'm a life coach and I've done my life coach training and I only coach. I don't practice psychotherapy anymore, but I still consider myself a clinical social worker, even though I'm not practicing as a therapist anymore, because it's still a part of my internal identity. But I also have to be flexible with that, because the truth is that I'm not working as a therapist now, and coaching is, obviously it's good for your mental health, but it's quite different from therapy. And so that I think that's kind of that professional identity that we, how much is it, and this is, I think, what it comes down to, how much is it the label of what you do versus who you really are? And I think in my core, I'm someone who, I will always be in a helping profession. Always, always. I will always be in something where I'm sitting across from someone and holding space for their story. And so that might take different shapes. I have to be flexible about the label of that. And I think that was hard for me at the beginning.
Yeah, it's a good point. And sometimes it's sorry, I think you cut off. I thought you finished.
Yeah, I finished, but I did finish, but it kind of broke up.
Okay. Yes, that was a really good point about maybe sometimes relabeling helps.
Yeah.
And I was actually at a picture of an onion. It's like you thought your core is the onion, but there's actually more core inside, and sort of there's like a superficial of, I am a psychotherapist, or I am a coach.
Yeah.
But there's also the core. I just want to help people, and I can choose many different ways to help people. And that's actually bring more flexibility into this life if there are other constraining you in this life, for example, following your husband overseas.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Can I ask you the same question? Have you been faced with where you're at a place and you have to access a level of flexibility that is very difficult for you and makes you kind of examine, what am I doing and who am I?
Yeah, I think the main turning point for me is actually before I became a trailing spouse. It was when I was working in India, when I was single. That was the year before we got engaged, and I decided to basically, I need to do this before I decide that I want to stay with somebody for the rest of my life. So I left this area. I went to India and work in a local nonprofit on local salary. It was so I chose that experience to really examine who I am, because before that I was working a corporate job, and I have good salary. I live in my own apartment, and in India, not only does that I don't make enough to sustain that, also it's sort of adapting yourself to a new culture, new food, and it's all at least for me, I feel like at the very beginning it was, I chose that, so it was great for me to experience everything, but also through that really it made me realize that I wanted to go to India for two things. Like, first, almost like discovering who I am, in a sense, like what it is that I want to do in the long term, because the job I was doing in the US wasn't fulfilling, although I was very good at it.
Right.
And then in India, I had the life experience. I was also working in a similar sort of job function, in a sense, like doing research. And I thought that being in a place where I'm supposed to be helping people, and I work for a nonprofit, and I was, experiencing, living very frugally and living like,
Right.
hopefully living like middle income people in India.
Right.
And I still wasn't really fulfilled. Like that wasn't the issue. Like I experimented living life a different way,
Right. Right.
but that's still so in a sense that I sort of put that flexibility on myself, like strip everything and try to move to a different situation and realize, well, that's still not me, you know.
Right.
So what's me? So you like keep like peeling more off.
Right.
So that actually is the whole reason why I was no longer doing work related to sort of more at the macro level. You know, I was doing policy work and research work.
Right.
In general, it is supposed to be helping people
Right.
in a social sense, but
Right.
I don't feel like I was helping people.
Right.
It's not until I discovered financial planning where I'm actually helping people on an individual,
Yeah.
more close to this, and I realized that this is the way I want to help people
Right.
instead of having people as, you know, numbers, you
Right.
know, the
Right.
GDP,
Right.
the annual income that I make, and
Right.
you know, things like that.
Right. Right. Yeah. I love that idea, the way you said that, is kind of like this imposed or this kind of forced flexibility. Because while it sounds really harsh, at the same time, it's this recognition of the fact that, you know, as much as we try to control our environment, as much as we try to say like, this is the way that it is, and I want it to be this way, life is just so unpredictable. So, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, ultimately how hard you work to create structure and order, things are going to come along that are going to disrupt that. And if you've kind of forced yourself to push the boundaries of your flexibility, you know, you're kind of training your mind and training yourself emotionally to receive smaller opportunities of flexibility when they come up, you know? Yeah, that's amazing that you did that and that you saw and used it as a learning opportunity.
Yeah, so are there anything else? So we talked about, you know, two things about preparing yourself for a flexibility mindset. One thing is actually having that core, your identity and structure, and actually pushing the boundary of what you think being flexible means.
Right.
And is there anything else, just sort of in terms of mindsets, that people can do?
You know, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that is a good kind of cover of the basics of the mindset, right? You know, being open to the fact that you can be flexible about a lot of things surrounding a core thing, and that it's okay. And then, like you said, and then having this kind of you know, pushing your flexibility limits to see where you're open. But I wonder, you know, if we like shift from mindset to the kind of financial aspects, because now I am really curious, like from a financial perspective, like, I mean, how flexible can you actually be? You know, I mean, you don't, and then how do you prepare? I mean, it's two questions. So on the one hand, how flexible can you actually be just in general? But then the other question is, you know, as an expat, how do you create flexibility financially so that you are prepared for the ups and downs that happen in this lifestyle?
Yeah, it's a really good point because it's nice and well to have like a mindset of flexibility, but there's always physical constraint. And I just look at it, and it's not just money; it's just everything resource wise. No, including like.
Oh, I'm losing you a little bit.
You can't be.
It's kind of frozen. Uh-oh, Hui-chin.
You know, you need to. Okay, we're back. There was a slight technical glitch, and very important to our being flexible mindset.
Right.
Internet doesn't work. However, so we were talking about having the physical resources to be able to deal with be flexible. And I was saying, like, you actually need to be healthy. Like, you can't be, if you're sick, it's very difficult to be flexible. And money is obviously part of it.
Right.
And one thing I've talked about before on my blog and with my people who work with me is that it's just systematically you need to build that cushion in everything.
Right.
Your finances, whether it's income in your budget or your assets.
Right.
So, given time, if something happens, you can tap into that very quickly to help you be flexible.
Right.
So it's related to the concept of emergency fund, but it's also more than that. And I think one huge thing that expats can do is actually, before looking into assets, is looking at your budget.
Right.
Because I know not every expat, some expats live, lavish lifestyle, they can afford it. And some, like volunteers, they just don't have the money.
Right.
But even when you have very small income,
right.
there is always a way to carve out certain things, not just for savings, but just like, I will try not to spend 100% of my paycheck.
Right.
Right. I will try to spend only 90%.
Right.
And 95%. So you always know that, okay, if today, my mom is sick, I need to fly back home, I have this.
Right.
Or so there's that aspect of having budget. And I feel like another thing, trailing spouses or expat partners, I'm kind of prone to that as well, is that because we're very good at budgeting, we tend to budget everything. Right. And for some reason, because we budget is so tight, there's no cushion. So if something blows up or if something didn't end up being what we expected, it's end up, messing everything up. So even just in your day-to-day budget, just don't budget your entire income. If you make $5,000 a month, just budget $4,000. So, and then starting from that point, you say, oh, I actually have $1,000 extra. What do I do with it? You're saving, you can go travel, things like that. And another thing, so that's the income part. And there's also the, just the assets, whatever you have. And that's, one of the things that you might hear a lot of people say is that having an emergency fund, so you can tap into that when you need to. And so emergency fund and even disability insurance and life insurance, because those are also dealing with the unknowns, that requires you resources to do those things.
How do you find that having those things, like when you're working with clients and they make those shifts, right? And they become, they put money aside so that they can be more flexible and, take that vacation because they've been putting money aside for this healthcare concerns or, the car insurance or whatever. How do you find that changes, or do you find that changes kind of their general outlook about their expat experience?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's generally, I feel people, when you have the physical cushion, you do kind of have a more flexible mindset because you're more relaxed in that sense. Like you know what to do. So it's almost like even if you don't have, even if you make a very little income as a volunteer, or you don't have any assets, but even if you just have a plan, what to do if something, not even something bad, but just something that requires you to be flexible, then you're more relaxed. And that's definitely true, because you could be having a lot of assets but don't have a plan. And you would still be really, you might not be able to be flexible just because you don't know what to do. So you might a few days after the emotion has passed to look at, okay, this is what I can do. But usually it's difficult, especially like we're talking about if you have a medical emergency.
Right.
Never thought about what you could have done.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very stressful moment. I'm sure you experienced some of that when you're talking about your son's emergency.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I think about it, like, for example, one of the things that, so our oldest son now, it makes me think this, I don't know, putting this money aside and the freedom for flexibility that it brings up makes me think of an example that happened recently where we just started in the spring putting, like, our oldest son has braces and we have to make these payments spread out for the braces. So we started this spring putting the money aside in advance so that when the payment comes up for his braces, even though the insurance covers most of it, like, the money's set aside. But we recently discovered, like, that our insurance wasn't paying us, like, they weren't paying the claims. We realized that when we switch from, it's the same policy, but when we switch from the domestic to the international, they restarted, there's like a 12-month waiting period for orthodontics. They restarted the clock. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, I know. So we're working with them and we think that they're probably going to approve it because it's really like, come on, it's the same company. But because we set the money aside, we're working with them and we're able to feel pretty relaxed about it because it's not like we don't have the money to pay it. It's just we want we want the insurance to pay it. But because we started putting this money aside, we feel that obviously it's ideal, but we don't have to feel stressed about, it's ideal if the insurance pays it, but we don't have to feel stressed about it. Unpredictable thing happened that's totally related to the move from going to the domestic policy to the international policy, and I think that it's like a real-time example as you were talking. I'm like, hey, that's, that happened with us, if you have your ducks in a row. It isn't that interesting because it kind of comes back to that core thing of like, here's the things I need to be firm on so that I can be flexible in all of these areas around it.
Yeah, and that, and how really your mind and your physical and just the outside and the inside really do affect each other.
Right, for sure. Yeah, that mind-body connection for sure. Yeah, and mind everyday practical connection. Yeah.
All right, so appears that we're experiencing some more internet difficulties today. So maybe this is a good time for us to end this recording. I do feel like that even though we have all these issues, we talked about really great points. So I'll try to summarize it. I'm sure Jodi will do that as well. And I really look forward to sharing all this with you and hope to see you in July for our episode 4.
Schedule that.
Which Jodi will be hosting. And let's hope that internet will work that time. Yay.
Thank you so much, Hui-chin. I loved this conversation. This was super fun and interesting to talk about flexibility. Thank you.
Yeah, I love you too. Okay. See you, everybody. Bye.